Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Fiber Broadband Association's Five for Breakfast. We're now on our 28th episode of 2026. So we have officially well into the second half of the year. Today in Washington, the Fiber Broadband Association is holding its summer fly-in, where our members will be meeting with key members of the House and Senate to discuss critical issues and opportunities to accelerate fiber deployment. Today's DC fly-in will be followed by the Fiber Broadband Association's Fiber Day in the Hill tomorrow, Thursday. And this year, we expect, Fiber Day in the Hill will be back in the Rayburn building on Capitol Hill. And we'll expect to meet with over 200 members of Congress and their staff and members of administration, as well as the members of key agencies such as the FCC, NTIA, and USDA, just to name a few. Fiber Broadband Association's next Regional Fiber Connect workshop will be held next week in Bozeman, Montana on Tuesday, July 21st. Registration for Bozeman continues to be very strong, so please register as soon as you can on the Fiber Broadband website. After Bozeman, we'll be in Omaha in August, Boston in September, Savannah in October, and Vancouver, British Columbia in November, and we'll finish the year out with our premier member meeting in Islamorada, Florida, and the Keys in December. Last week on Five for Breakfast, our guest was Ahmed Ali, the senior analyst and lead of CRU's Optical Fiber and Cable Service, who discussed optical fiber and cable market outlook, the role of hollow core and multi-core fiber. Ahmed highlighted the fiber super investment cycle we're seeing, historic investment and fiber infrastructure for AI is being layered on top of the historic investment cycle in fiber to the home. So in addition to massive deployments of single mode fiber for broadband and AI infrastructure, Ahmed is forecasting the emergence of hollow core fiber and multi-core fiber for specific applications in data centers and enterprises, which require cables with very high fiber counts and extreme low latency requirements. So if you missed last week's session, you can go to our website and watch the replay. Today on Five for Breakfast, our guest is Colin Reilly, the Vice President of Data Strategies and Technical Services at Connected Nation. He's going to discuss closing the broadband gaps with smarter grant oversight. Colin is the Vice President of Data Strategy and Technical Services at Connected Nation, where he leads geospatial, data engineering, and technical oversight of initiatives in support of state and federal broadband programs. With more than 25 years of experience in managing complex, publicly funded infrastructure projects, Colin has worked closely with state broadband offices to support BEAD planning, subgrantee oversight, and program compliance. His work spans BEAD and broadband initiatives in states and territories, including Texas, Massachusetts, Missouri, Puerto Rico, and Guam. Colin specializes in risk-based monitoring frameworks to help state prioritize oversight resources, identify issues early, and ensure projects are delivered on time, on budget, in alignment with federal requirements. Colin has a bachelor's degree in landscape architecture from the University of Arizona and a master's of art geography from Hunter College. So welcome, Colin. For our audience, please type in your questions as we go, and we'll work those discussions. So before we start off, how do you become a landscape architect and end up in data science?
Very good. Well, I don't know. Landscape architecture, I was always interested in trees and nature and big golfer. So I don't know. I enrolled in landscape architecture. And then when I finished that, I never actually practiced. I did a little traveling and then got my master's degree in geography with an emphasis on spatial analysis, and then kind of.
Okay, there you go. See, your landscaping is moving to geography and geospatial.
Yes. Analysis. So the classic capability suitability analysis applies sort of like GIS, and when I was going to school, it wasn't quite GIS back then,
Well, and you have the best looking yard lawn in the neighborhood, so you got all that.
Yes, thank you.
All right, well, go ahead. I'll turn it over to you, Colin.
All right. Well, thank you, Gary, for that introduction and the opportunity to speak today. I've been a longtime viewer, but this is my first time presenting. So I'm going to be covering Connected Nations' risk modeling and sampling approach, which is mixed with our field validation effort to address the compliance and monitoring component of BEAD. And it applies machine learning to that problem statement, which falls under the AI umbrella at this point in time. So I hope the audience finds the talk informative. If there are any additional information that's required or follow-up questions needed, feel free to reach out directly to me. And I am one of a team of many. And so if there are questions I cannot answer, I will certainly follow up with a response. So should I scroll to the next slide, or is that? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, before you jump into this, can you talk about Broadband Nation does a lot of things. Can you just give a little background to our audience that might not be familiar with you guys? And of course, Bowling Green, I think is where you guys started, is the home of the Corvette Museum.
Yeah. Yeah. So this next slide kind of covers Connected Nations.
Okay, great.
It's a good pivot point, right? So I am with Connected Nation. We are a national non-for-profit founded in 2001, and our singular mission is to close the digital divide, and we like to refer to that as the access, use, and adoption. I'm going to be speaking more of them from the infrastructure perspective today, but we tackle all sides of that triangle. So we maintain. We are an independent source of objectivity for our clients, and we do that by not designing, building, maintaining, or licensing broadband networks. So we are, as I said, an independent, objective source to our clients. We have over 25 years of experience, as you can see in the top right, the logo. It's our anniversary this year. And we've worked with federal governments, territories, states, local governments, helping them to ensure that their broadband investments are administered with integrity, documented rigorously, and delivered in compliance with the program specifications and requirements. So we like to think of ourselves as an extension to these broadband offices. So today, I'm going to be talking about a multidisciplinary approach to monitoring and compliance, and it utilizes multiple teams within our organization to support our clients. So first off is our engineering and technical services team, which is headed up by John Detterman. And this team is comprised with former telecom technicians, engineers, operators, folks that have hands-on experience building and maintaining broadband networks. And we experience ranges from 10 years to over 30 years experience in the field. And we support all technologies, both wireline and wireless, and we're always keeping pace with latest technology advancements. And we also encompass in this service our data science research team, headed up by Chris McGovern. And I can say that they all have very advanced degrees, and they're expert in qualitative and quantitative analyses, research methods, data analysis, visualization, coding, and the application of machine learning and AI, if you will. And lastly, and not least, is our geospatial mapping team, near and dear to my heart, as I said, and that's really a team that's involved in a lot of the data processing, both pre and post of running these models, doing some additional spatial analyses, and then really being able to present the results on sort of informative dashboards, as you can see here, interactive maps, right? So data without being presented in a coherent form is not quite information. So that's kind of the last leg of the stool, if you will. So that's a background both on Connected Nation and the service areas within connected nation that work together to provide what we like to think of as a multidisciplinary approach to compliance and monitoring. Next slide, please. So yes, so just kind of current situation. I'm sure everyone watching is fairly knowledgeable, but this is very much at this point in time focused on the BEAD program, but we have applied this or similar models to CPF programs. So, and the current NTIA approach is really a self-certification compliance model, right? This is a semi-annual report that has speed tests with latency results in it. And, and many states might find that sufficient in their needs for compliance, right? But what we've seen is other states want to have more of a show me approach. They want to have an independent source verify some of this information that's being reported to them. And that's where this service falls in, right? We're not focused purely on speed and latency. We're doing visual assessments. We're looking at no BEAD locations that have been dropped from projects. And then lastly, like you have broadband offices that are probably spread fairly thin, limited staffing. So we as I said in the past, previous slide, we're looking to supplement. So we work as a partner with our clients. Next slide, if you will, please. So then just kind of, again, this monitoring and compliance work, this risk model and sampling approach and the work out in the field is really a framework that is adaptable to specific client and program needs and specific project parameters, right? And the other aspect of it is it can be, instead of at the end state, compliance is, okay, a check, the speed meets the requirements, the latency is under the certain requirements, right? This can be applied throughout the project, right? We can do it as initiation, during construction, and at closeout. And we're looking at different variables along the way, but it's an opportunity to potentially address issues before they become too problematic and they cannot be addressed, right? So this is a more proactive approach instead of reactive, maybe in a way. And hopefully it maximizes the spend on the overall program, and it provides states greater confidence in reporting out to their government leaders and constituents. So next slide. So yeah, so now the meat of, so again, this is a risk model and sampling approach mixed in with field validation, right? So for simplicity's sakes, I've shown a linear one-time run of this solution, but it actually can be a circular approach where each run informs successive runs. So if you think about doing it during initiation, we're looking at maybe a set of variables. Is the provider aware of all the programmatic requirements? What we find out in there, we use as variables in the next run of the model. We're doing it during construction. We're not maybe looking at broadband service locations and how they're connected, but we're looking at key network assets at that point in time, rerun it, and then at closeout, you're doing final testing, right? So it's an iterative approach, and it's not just at the end state. So really the first step in the process is compiling all available data, and we're working with our clients on that. Then we're applying a set of weights. So some variables may have greater impact on a project or program and others less. So we weight those accordingly, and those are done in conversations with our clients. And examples like, in the initial proposal, final proposal data, there's a match rate, right? So we're looking at that. The higher the match rate, the more vested interest the provider has in the project. So then there's probably less risk because there's more skin in the game there, right? Proximity to existing networks, footprint of the provider in the state and their track record, and also how committed they are across the BEAD program. So all of these are factors that could go into the model and be components of an initial run or successive runs, right? So then after we've applied the weights, we then run the model and calculate a risk score. Then we follow that up by running a machine learning algorithm that puts those data points into discrete buckets and then assigns a risk based on the commonality within those data points. And so we'll have high risk, medium risk, and low risk projects. And then once we've sort of classified projects by risk, we then need to determine the sample size, the appropriate sample size for each project. And we do it at a project by project basis, not at the programmatic level. So we run, once again, another machine learning algorithm, which is basically trying to determine the minimum number of locations we can visit to find an issue if one does exist. And it's somewhat counterintuitive. I think logically we all think lower risk, we sample less, higher risk, we sample more, but it's actually the inverse of that. Because a low risk project, you expect less issues, you actually need to sample more locations to encounter an issue. So once we've done that, we determine the sample size for each project location. And let's say for argument's sake, for 1,000 BSLs in a project, the sample size is 50. We'll then randomly select BSLs to determine which sites we're going to go out and field validate. So that's sending out our field technicians with the prior telecom experience to go out there and do everything from visual assessments to actual testing using a variety of equipment and material that we have at our disposal, right? So we'll be looking at splice enclosures, splitter cabinets, towers, sector antennas, so we'll be looking at a variety of aspects and looking to see if it's during construction as opposed to closeout, are they in line with the schedule progress that they're reporting, or are they behind schedule? BABA compliance plays into there too. Are they using the equipment that they spec'd out early on? And then also mixed in with that, we'll be running speed tests. We use specialized software to run those speed tests. Those speed tests are all routed through the FCC designated IXPs. And then we'll also, as locations fall out, if there are no BEAD locations or the subgrantee is indicating that service is already provided there, the clients may ask us to go and just verify that information is in fact correct. Again, capture photographic evidence. So in the end, when we produce a final report, it's auditable and defensible, and it's something that the client can hang their hat on. Next slide, please. So as I've indicated, we've already started this work in multiple states for BEAD specifically, but we have many years experience doing this for other programs, CPF programs, and other federally funded programs. And we have established an excellent relationship with the provider. So I don't want this to seem as if it's an adversarial relationship, and it's really not. We have a very positive relationship, and it's just seen as a step along the way, just one step in the process. And independent verification is what this is really about, and it's not a new concept. It's widely used across many industries. You think underwriter laboratories is a key example. So really, the objective here is just to give, the states or territories more confidence and an independent verification that the project was built to the contract specifications. And the framework that we've developed, it's not a one size fits all. It's not a black box, right? I know AI has a lot of assumptions associated with it, but we can tailor this to specific needs of the program. And a good example is if 100% of the locations have to meet a speed threshold, then we have one approach. If other contracts that we've seen, it's like, okay, at least 80% have to meet, then we have a sort of different approach. So we can target it to specific needs of the program and the state. So I think I'll I'll pause there and take any questions. I hope that was informative and clear.
Yeah. So, Colin, I guess the first one that comes to mind is, how do you measure LEO service compliance? I mean, today, Ookla is saying they only about 40% are meeting the 100 by 20 and not even looking at latency. And that's with very few subscribers. So as you actually get to the point, and you have to do this for what, 10, you have 4 years to build and 10 years to deliver this performance. So this compliance testing is going to last for 4 years after the build, or is that during the build, or how is that?
Yeah, so it's during the build, so it's the full duration. I mean, it's up to really the client, right? So what we're saying is we would work through the full duration of the program up to the full years, and if it's LEO for the 10 years, if that's the case, if that's what the client chooses, right? So we would apply a similar approach to LEO, right? So we would be looking at different variables, right? We would still want to classify risk, and we did this earlier on in the process when there was the whole concept of tree canopy obstruction, and you had population density as sort of variables that have impacts on LEO services, right? So we'd run the model. Locations that have higher tree canopy obstruction would be considered higher risk, and so would be sampled. But yeah, so our approach is looking at different methodologies. So if the LEO providers are willing to participate and give us access to the network, we can run tests in one way. If that is not an option, then there are mobile devices that can be used, and we
can like
can
a Sam Nose box or something like that, or
or even like you subscribe to the said service, and they have like the mobile one that you can throw on top of an RV, and it's maybe not the full service for the home, but at least you can do sort of an initial sniff test. So some of it will depend on the willingness of the subgrantee to participate in the testing.
So at the beginning of the year, we did a roundtable with NTIA obviously they want BEAD to be wildly successful, and they're looking for early indicators of, subgrantees that might be getting in trouble. So how do you build in, is that what you're looking
Yes.
through?
Yeah.
Looking for key indicators that there might be, might need to pay attention to this build.
Yeah. And again, this is kind of like, a menu, and the state could select what they want to go ahead with. But for instance, during initiation, we have questionnaires that we will be, and information we will require or asked from the subgrantees, and just to get an understanding of their understanding and awareness of the program requirements, permitting, do they understand, is their timeline sufficient? Does the budget seem appropriate? I mean, all of this has been pre-screened as part of these awards, but there's another, maybe more detailed lens on some of this data, and then it's like, okay, they have, they lay out a project schedule, and whatever it may be, we're looking early on, are they falling behind? And if so, then we have some initial indicators. Are they having problems buying equipment? Whatever it may be. But yes, that is part of the solution.
So you mentioned permitting. In our workshop, obviously permitting was by far the biggest concern on, causing project delays and running up costs, result in delays. How do you calculate like locates and permitting, those, the biggest issue is not even just the delay, is the no visibility, because when you're trying to marshal limited resources, workforce, you need to make sure your crew's in the right place when the permitting's approved. And if you never know when your permit's approved, you never know where to put your resources. So how does that work in the model?
Yeah, so we're not the NEPA consultant, we're not doing the permitting, but states have those consultants on board and are assisting with that, or they're coordinating those activities themselves. And there's, data points that are coming out from those activities, what permits and what type of permits are needed and where, and all of that gets fed into the model. And there's certain dates at which these activities need to be completed by. There's if the schedule is going to progress as it's identified, right? So if we see that they're not accounting for all permits, that would be sort of a red flag. If they're not hitting their milestone dates, that's kind of another red flag. But I don't want it to seem as if we're doing the permitting. That's just another data stream that's coming into us, and we're reacting to how that work is going forward.
So you mentioned you have like 3 buckets: low risk, medium risk, high risk.
Yep.
That's from day one, or is that so like if you doing a risk assessment before the project started, and then you start to see that risk score start going up, is that?
Yes. Yep, exactly. Yes. So like the final proposal data, all that information that goes into the model, and there's additional financial information that's going to be provided to the state. So all of that will go in for the initial run. Yes. Along with some other geospatial or environmental characteristics of the landscape that will go in. Like I used the tree canopy example for Leo, but there's other environmental factors that will go into the model outside of that. So yes, that would be, say, the initial run. And if we're running it multiple times, as the providers begin to report and, the semi-annual reports, those will be fed in, other variables will be fed in. There's other specific state requirements for reporting that will go in. And yes, risk scores can change through the duration of the project.
So is there kind of some alarm bell that your model will then say, to the SBO, this, you're beyond your risk tolerance for this project, and what actions would they take?
Yeah, so it's really up to the state. We're here about awareness. So we're not saying that just because it's high risk, it means it's going to fail. That is not what we're saying here. There may be factors that make it a little more risky, but it's going to be fine, right? So I don't want to give that impression, but so we're, the risk score is a means for determining the sampling and going out there and field validating the actual work, right? As we're out there and as we're doing even the initial interviews with the providers, we're recording issues and reporting those to the states, and we are, recommending in some cases corrective actions that need to be taken. And then it's really up to the state and how they react to those. Presumably they will be raised with, construction really hasn't begun, but they'll be raised with the subgrantee. Hey, we've noticed this. We want your plan on how to correct them. There's a date to correct those. And then that goes into the model. If it's not corrected by said date, then it escalates further. So yeah, it's all kind of part of the process.
Now, you mentioned you guys had experience with Capital Projects Fund compliance.
Yep.
How big a difference do you think BEAD compliance is going to be versus capital projects?
I think it's really similar at the end of the day, right? So, states have approached it differently. Some states we work with want to have eyes on nearly every location. But I think it's going to be very similar. What you have with CPF is it's kind of somewhat the Wild West. So there's a little more with BEAD, guidance on how at least NTIA wants compliance to be accomplished, but there is a degree of latitude that states can choose, something above and beyond that.
Given that,
I think the difference overall with CPF is you have, not, hundreds of projects all underway at the same time, right? So I think that kind of is a bit different.
Well, I think to me, the big concern is that, last year Commerce put a high pressure on lowest cost provider. And you were saying, significant number of walkaways because there's really no margin of error for providers, as you know, the grant had been significantly reduced, and so that put more pressure on them to be more accurate on cost. And as we see supply chain and high inflation and other things, so is that, I mean, I don't know what your crystal ball tells you, but is that going to be one of the biggest issues we have for noncompliance? Is just there's no room for error and cost?
I mean, I wouldn't say there's no room, but it's razor thin margins, right? So, and I think maybe bigger providers can, withstand more than maybe some smaller ones can, right?
Yeah. Greater
buying power, they have, larger footprints. So it might be skewed in that direction. I don't know. Crystal ball. I mean, I don't really know where it's going to be, but I think, yeah, there are definitely challenges ahead.
Last question here. So does the state use your information to report back to NTIA or OMB, or is it just for their own use, or how do they leverage this data?
Well, it's TBD. I mean, we expect to be producing some public-facing dashboards to convey this, this information back to their state constituents. But yeah, I mean, it will be, and I'm not exactly sure how, reported up into the NTIA. So issues that arise or, project delays, right, that we are helping to surface, obviously, will work their way to the NTIA, and maybe not directly in how we're reporting them, but I would imagine they are, yes.
Well, Colin, thanks so much. This is really interesting.
Thank you.
And we hope that all the broadband projects stay on track and get delivered to make sure that all Americans have access to high-speed broadband.
Absolutely.
I hope everybody joins us again next Wednesday. We're going to have Dave Thomas, the CEO of Eagle One Resources. He's going to discuss the right-of-way wars, winning the fiber deployment battle. So you're not going to want to miss that. So we'll see you guys next Wednesday. Thanks again, Colin, and we'll look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you.